Let's go to line one. Hello, Brad Cabana. You're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. How are you?
I'm doing fine this morning. How are you?
Good. Pulling double duty.
I'm pulling double duty. Randy had a few days off. Good for him. So he'll be back on Friday morning, which is also very good. Brad, what's the update down Supreme Court?
Well, of course, we're waiting for a decision on whether the judge is going to recuse herself or not from the trial. So we'll see. I guess she'll be writing her decision this week, and we're supposed to hear it early next week, apparently.
Does that put her right back to square one, if indeed she does recuse herself?
Yes, it does. Yeah, puts her right back to square one. Now, of course, there's some key decisions that got in that process so far, and we'll start all over.
I don't know. I don't think it's good for anybody, and it'd be particularly not good for you. Is that fair to say?
I wouldn't say that, no.
If and when it comes to cover of costs, if that ever becomes the reality that you're subjected to, would that include the process that took place under Judge Butler, if and when she recused?
So I would think that, responsibility for recusing oneself would rest with the individual, and simply bringing it to the attention of them, shouldn't place those costs on you. If they should have done a certain thing in the beginning and didn't, well, then, it's not exactly your responsibility.
Yeah, no, but when a judge removes his or herself from the bench, is not an admittance of any biased or built-in vendettas or anything, so I don't know, and I don't know the answer. I just asked just in case you might maybe found out. Can we talk about some of the specifics that are going on down there? Basically, just lay down the basis of your argument. The fact that the Innu were given a vote on a land claims deal that did include what some can call a referendum on Muskrat Falls, how does that, in your estimation, translate to the rest of the citizens being given the same benefit, knowing that Aboriginals have a far different level of treatment and resolution of land claims issues than everybody else?
Well, that's a complex argument, but I guess a short version of that would be that once a government is under no obligation to give anybody a referendum, except in the case of separation, apparently. But that vote that the Innu had was recognized by the government as a sort of a referendum. As a matter of fact, the quote is, the Innu people agree that the project shall go ahead. In that sense, it was a referendum for them on whether or not that project would go ahead. Once the government agrees to give one part of the population a referendum, it cannot deny it to the rest of the population when it affects the rest of the population. I wonder
what this is, I guess, exactly the point being argued is, I wonder how can that be directly translated to the rest of us, because this was one facet of a lands claim vote, a land claim agreement that was being put forward. How do you separate that out from what was the overall scope of the agreement that the Innu were voting on?
Well, that's an interesting point, because they were all lumped together into one vote. But it gets into complex law. There's Supreme Court references on it, but essentially it boils down to a referendum must be conducted in a certain way. The question must be clear. In court I pointed out that the question even mislabeled one of the agreements. It called it an agreement in principle for Innu land rights when there is no such agreement. But the agreement actually is Labrador Innu Land Claims Agreement. So the vote itself was very questionable. But beyond that, the major point is going to be the water management agreement, the constitutionality of that. That's going to be a center point, and whether or not when this comes back to the floor, whether it's with the same judge or whether. And the problem I have with it is that from everything I've studied on it, and including the Reversion Act back from 1984 when Peckford lost that in the Supreme Court, is that we cannot trample on their rights. If we do so, we're going to lose. And my concern is that this water management agreement imposed by those amendments that Danny Williams did back in 2007 to the Electrical Power Control Act have never been tested in court. It's never been sent to a Supreme Court reference, not even to a Newfoundland Supreme Court reference. So it's untested law as to whether or not it violates in the same way that the Reversion Rights Act did. And in my opinion, it does. It's just putting a lipstick on the pig, but it's basically the same effect. And now, if that happens, you have to consider the fact that we've already, as a province, spent $1 billion on untested law without knowing what our legal grounds. So
But now they say that they've tested this with their lawyers, though, so it's not like it's never been before a lawyer for investigation of the Water Management Rights Agreement and the particular implications it could have in Muskrat Falls. Every side says they've had a lawyer look at it.
Well, I appreciate that, and I'm sure they have, and I'm sure they know exactly what they're doing in some ways, but they also had lawyers look at the Water Reversion Act. It also went through the Supreme Court of Newfoundland and Labrador and the Appeals Court of Newfoundland and Labrador, and it passed both of those levels. But when it got to the Supreme Court of Canada, said, no, this is why. And the very same reasons that they said this is why you can't do it, we're doing it again with the Water Management Agreement. And that's the part that worries me because, it's so obvious that that's what we're doing, and that's why I want to bring it forth and get judicial opinion. It should be judicially reviewed before we spend, like we've already spent $1 billion without. So if this thing is nixed today, right, we've already spent $1 billion on something that's not legal.
Yeah, all the commentary and reviews that I've seen and heard regarding the Water Rights Management Agreement looks like we are in zero jeopardy, but I'll, of course, leave that for judicial review, considering the fact that we're in the middle of that process. Brad, there's one thing that... there's a lot of the media outlets that report on this. Some condemn the media for even reporting on it, treating it as news, but when in fact it is news. The constitutional challenge is absolutely real news. You sometimes imply, I think if I'm reading between the lines with some of your tweets and what have you, that you think you're being portrayed unfairly by the media, both in this challenge and your overall position on Muskrat Falls. Do you think that's true, that you're given a unfair shake?
Absolutely.
How so?
No question.
How so?
Well, first of all, really, this is not really about me. I mean, this is really about a legal question, and a legal question that affects, massively. So it's not about me. I'm only just doing it because nobody else is doing it. But, there's certain media out there that have, and people can judge for themselves when they read certain papers or whatever, that this is, a failed candidate here or a tried for leadership twice there or whatever. That's really irrelevant. The relevant point is whether or not these are legal questions that imperil our province. And in that regard, that's the way it should be looked at. As far as I'm concerned, it wouldn't be a matter of me or if it was somebody else who took us forward, but it just happens to be me in this case because no one else will.
But how does that mean that the media has unfairly portrayed you and or your cause?
Well, insofar as, for instance, in a newspaper article, when 50% of the article is about me, and 80% of the arguments are being left out of the article, well, the people aren't really getting the full picture. Matter of fact, they're not getting, they're getting about 10% of the picture. So, I think the media is there to inform people, not to sort of, say, well, this guy's a fool or that guy's a fool. I mean, stick to the issues and the legal issues at hand and how they're going to affect the people in the province.
Yeah, but reporting on the facts such as, and I've heard you you've opposed this point of view that's offered in some of the media reports, is people point to the fact that you ran for both parties and they comment on the number of votes you got in the provincial election, those things. If they're not just facts, how do you take offense to those when reported? Because someone might be reading some of these things for the first time or really not that in tune with what's happening. So a background on who someone is something generally offered in media reports of anything regarding anything going on in the course for someone with political aspirations. So how are they unfair?
Well, first of all, I mean, if you're going to go down that road, then you should give a complete explanation. For instance, you should say that he did attempt to run for the PC leadership, but he was thwarted by it, and basically, as we've seen through the machinations of the PCs controlling the radio waves, controlling the polls, subverting that whole process, you should be giving people the full story, instead of just saying, simply, he did this and that. So when you're not giving people the full story and you're putting those snippets out there to frame your argument, your perspective and your bias, then, I don't think that's fair.
Yeah, but that, of course, would be a matter of opinion based on what your experience was, what you think was a unfairly thwarted approach to being the leader of either party. So, I understand your point, but I also don't think that people are attacking you unnecessarily when it comes to reporting the facts of your background. But it's, of course, where you stand depends on where you sit. I use that all the time. Brad, listen, I'm sure we're going to hear from Judge Butler through a written submission regarding your hope to have her removed from this case. Deal. Regardless if people think it's news or not, it certainly is. I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much, Patty. Take care now.
All the best. Bye-bye. Brad Cabana, any comment to offer on that front? Listen, it doesn't necessarily bother me particularly that people want to condemn him or anybody else, because that's a matter of opinion. People have their own stance on this stuff. It is kind of tricky, and, whatever you got to say is your own opinion. You're welcome to it. But it is worth repeating that there's an awful lot of like-minded people out there who they will share opinion with Brad. They will retweet the hell out of each other all the time with their own like-minded opinion on Muskrat Falls. And when push came to shove, and an opportunity to do more than bellyache or display your keyboard bravado or your completely full of baloney stance on a variety of matters concerning Muskrat Falls, where were you then? Well, you were nowhere. In your mother's basement looking for a pizza pop and screaming bloody murder on your keyboard. Yeah, well, good for you.